Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Holden's 11. We got a terrific topic tonight, and one of my favorite people as a guest. And I'd like to welcome back my cohort, my pal, writer and creator, Peter Welmerink. Welcome, Peter.
Come get some
It's
rock
great
and
to see you.
roll.
It's great to see you, man, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
So, are you ready to talk about tonight's topic, the top 11 classic metal album covers?
Yeah, like Air Supply and oh wait, sorry.
That's
Okay.
next week. That's next week, man.
Okay. Favorite soft rock groups.
Well, I just want to say, man, I hope you have a great new year. I've enjoyed your books that you're putting out. It's just a pleasure to see you again, and I can't wait to get to our topic. So without further delay, let's launch right in. This is Holden's 11, the top 11 classic heavy metal album covers. So our purpose for tonight, we are going to focus a little bit on what I call, Peter, the classic album covers, and we're going to try and trace them back to their source. And I think this is going to be a fun list. So without further delay, let's get right into it. Number 11, Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power from 1992. Yeah, you got a great description of it there. Are you a Pantera fan?
No.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I'm not again, I don't have anything against the group, but it's just like I was listening to the Vulgar Display of Power earlier this afternoon, and some of the songs I really liked, and other ones I'm just like going, makes me want to smash into a telephone pole at Mach 10.
Well, I think that's what it's supposed to make you want to do. So,
I think so.
But what an effective album cover, right? I mean, you got the mid-punch face, and if anything shows the raw aggression of Pantera, this is it. This is the image, right?
That's true.
Very symbolic of the music of the time as well. And I think, like I said, and this isn't to rip on Pantera or anything.
Yeah. Yep.
I love metal. People that know me, they know I'm a classic metalhead. Mm-hmm. But, Pantera kind of came a little bit late to the game, in my opinion. And some people kind of forget that they sort of started as more of a glam band. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Huh. So they wanted to distance themselves from that by going with this harder image. And by the way, that's when they broke out. That's what worked for them. And I don't think there's very few album covers that are as memorable as this one. And I think, man, when you see that image,
you could say it's striking.
Yeah, you could say it's striking. Yeah, and you're getting ready to hear some ass kicking music as soon as you see this album cover.
Oh yeah,
and
it's like some hard driving stuff. There's a couple I don't know, semi ballads on there. I believe I heard.
Yeah.
But the couple that I came across, of course, I was driving at the time, so I'm like, oh,
yeah. I'm pretty sure Walk is the big hit off that album, right? It's Walk. Yeah, that was their big hit. Well, not their big hit, I guess.
Right.
The one that stands out in my mind.
What was their bigger or biggest hit?
To my mind, I'm pretty sure that was their biggest one. I think it's called Walk. If I'm wrong about this, viewers, as always, correct me in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinions about that kind of stuff. So that's our number 11. I think that as we go up this list, you're going to get to some even more classic ones. This is one of my personal favorites. This is number 10, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath. That's from 1984. When I first saw this album cover, it scared me kind of. And I didn't put too much stock in these groups that were claiming to be sort of satanic. Yeah, I realize that it's a marketing gimmick. Okay,
is that the one with the devil's head?
And I'll put it on the screen here for the viewers. But yeah, it's the devil leaning out of the flames, like accusing you. Don't break the oath. And man, what a scary image, right? I can remember seeing this as a kid and thinking, boy, if anybody was satanic, it's these guys.
Right.
And then, of course, when you hear the song, it is a full-blown satanic prayer. It's downright scary. And I got to tell you, I love this album. It's the musicianship of Merciful Fate is really unmatched for the time period that they were in. And admittedly, the vocals are not for everyone. King Diamond has that sort of high falsetto singing style. And it's either you love it or you hate it, right? It's
Yep.
definitely kind of grating. But in fairness, he doesn't sound like anybody else.
Right. Now I have to admit, and you can hate me if you want to, um, but I've not heard of Merciful Fate.
Well, they're a little bit
I don't.
more underground than some of the
Okay.
acts on this list. And,
Okay.
this is a little bit of an odd choice, right? And as I've told our viewers before, it's difficult to curate these lists and to
Right.
maintain some integrity to the list. So, as you know, these are compiled from our thousands of followers, Pete, and organized and compiled by myself. And what made this
Right.
album cover stick out to me was just how frightening that image is.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I remind you, that's 1984. Nobody else was really doing it quite like that in those days. And, there was some, we're going to get to some of the bands on the list. There was some guys that were doing some sort of what I would call satanic material,
Yep.
but it was almost always sort of for laughs. And you could tell that it
Right.
wasn't really too
Right.
satanic. But
Yep.
the first time, I will tell you that I'm still at times to this day hesitant to play Merciful Fate in case I accidentally unlock a portal to another dimension.
Well, and it probably doesn't help that I'm pretty sure you were probably what, 10 years old when you were listening to this stuff. You
God
naughty,
bless you. Yes,
you
I'm so
naughty,
young. Yeah.
you naughty. Your parents probably had no idea. No idea.
Yeah, I will tell you that the way it came up, as you know, I was a musician in those days, and this
Hmm.
was we had played a couple of the songs on that album.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, always
That's
look
cool.
forward to it.
Yeah.
So, but for those of you that aren't maybe the biggest on satanic rock, I'm going to go with another classic. This one is number 9. It's from Kiss. That's Destroyer from
Hell,
1976.
hell yes.
One of the best album
Hell
covers ever.
yes.
Yeah, right. And that's Ken Kelly, right, on that album cover.
What?
Isn't that who drew that album
Oh,
cover?
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
greatest
That's a
illustrators of all
cool.
time.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
it's a little panorama of Kiss cavorting in front of the ruined, burning, apocalyptic city.
Yep.
And same thing now. Of course, some of these albums go back a way, and
Yep.
it's funny. You look at these visual images, and the visual images, the good ones, they have a tendency to defy time. Like here, we're looking at this. As I say this, it is 2023, and that album cover is still as cool today as it was when it came out.
I agree. I agree. That's one of that to me, that's like a iconic Kiss album cover.
Yeah.
And it's also one from that period of where a lot of these album covers were, I'd say, truly art pieces. I mean, you had Frazetta doing stuff, and anyway, he did some stuff for Nazareth.
Oh yeah.
There's
Yeah.
some, and so yeah, it's some of this stuff they belong in picture frames.
Sure, absolutely. And man, I got to imagine that somewhere in the world, that original art piece for that album is hanging in someone's collection as their most treasured piece.
Yep. Yeah.
I will say that this was the album that it was the breakout album for Kiss. And, they still weren't taken very seriously in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the one that had the hit single on it. It was Beth. Yeah.
Yes.
Which was sort of their power ballad. And, it charted and it did very well. And it was one of those things that every time you heard it, people were going, that's Kiss? Like they couldn't believe it. And,
yeah. And I think that was it Peter Criss that sang that?
It was.
Yeah. So a little side story on my part. So I've never owned a Kiss album. And again, a lot of viewers will probably say, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, what the hell is wrong with you, Pete?
I know. However, I had the 45 single of Beth. And on the B side was Detroit Rock City.
Oh yeah.
And so, and to me, and again, I listened to some of these albums earlier today, just so I could get my recollection going. And I'm like going, dang, Detroit Rock City was the first track. and then I think Beth was like on side
Side B, it's like the
B
third. Yeah, it's
of,
pretty far back there.
yeah, and I'm like going, I didn't realize that Destroyer had Detroit Rock City and Beth on it. So, and Detroit Rock City is like probably one of my favorite Kiss songs, because
Yeah, mine too.
obviously they played the hell out of Rock and Roll All Night,
Mhm.
but Detroit Rock City, just I can you can visualize the story that's going on. So
Right, right. And
anyway,
I remind people this isn't really a thing anymore, but in the 70s, it was common that would your songs, they would sort of tell a little story.
mhm,
You know what I mean? It was, I don't want to say deeper because when you talk about Kiss, it's not exactly deep subject matter,
right,
but it
right,
is it'd be fair to say that's something that's not done as often as it was back then. I mean, you got
right,
Detroit City, Billy Don't Be a Hero,
mhm,
The Night Chicago Died. You know, the song would tell a little story. And
right,
to talk about the longevity of the song, here it is almost 50 years later, and this is still the opening number of a Kiss concert,
nice.
which perhaps even more amazing, they're still touring.
Is it? Wait,
Yeah,
is Detroit Rock City their opening
yeah.
song?
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Well, as
cool.
near as I can tell, it always alternates.
Right.
Every time I've seen them, and even in all the live ones I've seen, it is Detroit Rock City is the opener. But
Nice.
if you dig around a little bit, you'll find that sometimes they open with Love Gun.
Okay.
I guess it
Yep.
depends on the length of the set.
Yeah. I could see Detroit Rock City being like the perfect, because
Yeah, yeah. By the way, that's where they, yeah, you know, that's where they would light off. You know, they light off dynamite in the beginning of that
sure.
song. Yeah, that's why. So that's where the dynamite goes off, and that's where they have those two flame cannons on either
Right.
side.
Yep.
Boom, in the
Yep.
flames. So I can remember buying a Kiss album,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, in those days, that was pretty much the most shocking album you could buy. Like if you were
Right.
trying to outrage your parents,
Right.
every self-respecting parent hated Kiss, and that's what I liked about
Yep.
it. I wanted to hear music that my parents hated, quite frankly.
There you go. Yep. No Lawrence Welk here.
No Lawrence Welk there. And speaking of music that parents would hate, you want to talk about a shocking one, or at least I felt that it was when it came out. This goes back to 1981, Pete. This is Iron Maiden, Killers is our number 8. The Killers album. First of all, I got to give you a full disclosure. I am a huge Iron Maiden fan. Okay.
Nice.
And when I was young, I wanted to be Steve Harris, who is the bass player for Iron Maiden. And he had the best technique for playing bass in those days. They'll kind of have that galloping, which is what they call the hammer stroke, right?
Yep.
And he
Yep.
had the best hammer stroke out of any of the bass players that I followed. And when Killers came out, of course, and I hadn't heard of Iron Maiden yet in those days. They were already out, but this was the first song of theirs that I heard. And it was just so full of bass and so aggressive and so in your face. And I said, let me see the album cover. And, here's this long-haired maniac with the bloody hatchet, and his victim is like clutching his shirt. It's really grim, right?
Right.
And it just made such an impact on me. I was like, I'm going to follow these guys. And of course, I went back and got their first album as well.
Yep.
But then the next step, of course, from them, actually, I'm going to put the brakes on because they're the one band on this list that's going to appear twice. So I'm going to save this next comment till they pop back up. But,
Yep.
So with that in mind, we're going to lurch forward in the years a little bit to 1987. This is number 7, Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction.
Yep.
And this
I've never heard of that one before. I've never. Welcome to the jungle, sweet child o' mine.
Man, they were big, I tell you what. And there was actually kind of 2 album covers, if you remember. There was one that was one is kind of like the symbol of the cross with their 4 heads. And that's the iconic one that everybody knows. And it's been remade and rebooted into many things. Most notably, there's the Guardians of the Galaxy reboot that uses that logo, and it's called Appetite for Protection. And it shows the Guardians in the thing, right? And
I don't know that one.
Yeah, there was another album cover that came with this one that was banned, and it was the one where the It's like a robot jumping over a fence and attacking a girl, but not too many people know about that one. So I kind of left that off. If I'm not
Right.
mistaken, that one was banned in the US.
Huh. I, I, anyway, we won't go there.
What? Lay it on me, man. It's all right.
Banned in the US. Come on, man. We're like,
Well, if you
won't go
remember,
there.
and of course, I'm going back to we're talking about albums that are from the 80s primarily. And in those days, there was a full-on effort to censor metal
Yes.
albums.
Yep.
And that was led by Tipper Gore, who was
Yep.
the wife of Al Gore. It was
Yep.
the PMRC, it was called, the Parents
Yep.
Music Resource Committee. And
Yep.
they were trying to censor albums all the time. And by the way, some of these albums you couldn't really defend. There were some kind of offensive ones. You and I have talked about this before. I'm not for censorship.
Right.
But
Yep.
I don't think there's too much harm in what they were trying to do, which it was something along the lines of like a movie where it was G, PG, R,
Yep.
or restricted, I think was
Yep.
the top one. And they didn't use the movie rating system, but it was kind of based on that. And, and again, I'd like to hear from the viewers because, at the time we didn't like it. But,
Right.
looking back on it, it was maybe not a bad compromise because, you probably don't want your 7-year-old, exposed to some of this, at times, grim material.
At least back then. Now they
Yeah.
probably already saw that stuff on the internet at 5 years old. And
Right. I remind
desensitized.
anybody, yes, this is pre-internet, so it wasn't like you would have violence and hateful content spewing into your home 24 hours a day like now.
Right.
So, but a lot of them were really kind of shocking and controversial. And I'm going to go back to one that's, less controversial, but I still thought it was a cool cover. This is our number 6. That's Motley Crue with Too Fast for Love. That's 1981. And this is one that, go ahead, Pete.
Oh, I was going to say, that's the one with the cover. It's just like a kind of a leather crotch shot.
It's it's exactly what it is. It is a close-up of Nikki Sixx's leather-clad crotch.
Right.
And it's funny because in and of itself, that's not offensive in any way.
No.
But you look back to 1981, and that was an image that packed a little bit of punch.
Right.
You're like, I don't want to see your crotch, but
right.
Man, I tell you what, everybody noticed it right away.
It packed. It packed a little punch.
It packed a little punch.
What are you saying? That Nikki Sixx was small? It packed a little punch? Never mind.
You're going to hear from his attorneys.
No, I'm like giving him kudos for, anyway, never mind.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, but when that album came out, Motley Crue was relatively unknown outfit from LA, right? And within a year, or maybe 2 years, they were the top grossing act on the planet.
Nice.
I mean, and they just had.
Right. I never saw those guys. One of my all-time favorite Motley Crue albums is Dr. Feelgood.
Sure.
Which was, I think, 1990 or 1991.
Yep. Yeah.
So, but I swear, like every track on that album was gold.
They're all bangers. So, I'm a big fan too of Shout at the Devil.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's funny, like we talk about, compiling these lists is a little bit of a challenge, right? Because I really wanted to put Shout at the Devil on the list.
Yeah.
But I felt like I already had enough satanic representation from metal with Iron Maiden and Merciful Fate. So that's the only reason why you don't see Shout at the Devil. But for purposes of the podcast here, I'd like to remind our viewers that was super controversial when that one came out too. It was perceived as being very satanic, and Vince Neil came forward and he said some lines like, no, it's shout at the devil, not shout with the devil.
Right.
So, which is splitting hairs, right? To me, that wasn't, even if you listen to the words, it's not necessarily objectionable content. Where if you listen to, say, Merciful Fate, I mean, almost every word on that album is objectionable in some way. So, viewers, if you have not heard some of these songs, I strongly urge you to go and check it out and see what the shocking metal acts of the 80s were up to. That was what they were up to, man. And it was all the rage at the time. While we're kind of on the subject of controversial material, I'm looking forward to talking about number 5. That is a band by the name of Dio.
Yep.
Featuring our man, Ronnie James Dio.
Hell yes.
Holy Diver. That's from 1983. And that
That
one,
is
I'll put it on the screen here so our viewers can see it. That's, you know, you have the priest and he's drowning while being whipped by some kind of scary, monstrous figure who's a giant figure in the background.
right.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a grim image, right?
You know, I I've I've got that CD. Never had the album. I got the CD. I've always been a Dio fan.
Mm.
Mainly when he was on or with Rainbow.
Oh yeah, yeah, great
Uh,
stuff.
Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, and
Sure.
then also we
Don't
did a
forget,
little
he was in
stint.
Black Sabbath.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Then he
Yeah.
did that, the Mob Rules, which is like one of
Oh,
my all-time
all
favorite
time.
songs. Um, but so I got Holy Diver and is it The Last in Line?
Oh yeah, great one. Yeah, that
Um,
one.
anyway, and to me, I mean, yeah, I looked at the covers, but they didn't. I think because I appreciate the music, and so it's like the covers, whatever,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah, obviously that would be a little controversial back
Well,
then.
and you know, I'll tell you something too, which is, and I'm not sure why their marketing department suggested this, because first of all, I was already familiar with Ronnie James Dio the same way that you were because of
Hmm.
his work in Rainbow, and I was a huge Sabbath fan, and Heaven and Hell, just one of the greatest albums in history, in my opinion. And I'd even seen them live a couple of times. So when it was announced that he was kind of splitting off and going on his own, you know, I couldn't wait to check out what Dio was doing and to see his live show.
Sure.
But you know, the thing about him, his lyrics were a little bit like mystical and kings and Lord of the Rings and
Yep.
dragons and
Yep.
but it didn't really reflect that in his album covers. The album covers went with like the sort of the shocking,
Oh,
almost
so
satanic stuff, which it's kind of odd, I thought.
so are you thinking that the marketing department probably wasn't? They probably weren't metalheads, and so they just went, well, you know, Satan and the kind of blood and giant beasts of hell, you know,
That's what
while
sells.
while
Yeah.
Dio, like you were saying, Dio's most of his work, in fact, oh, what is it? What's the Rainbow song?
Man on the
Or
Silver
not?
Mountain.
No, it's not that one. I'd have to like grab the. Anyway, there. Oh, uh, Rainbow in the Dark.
Oh no, that's a Dio song. That's on this album.
Yeah, to me that is, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't care. I stand by my word. I think that's a very positive
Yeah. Right.
fueled song.
Right.
If you really listen to the
Mhm.
lyrics, and I didn't really listen to the lyrics until I got those CDs, and I'm like going, I love this song. This like it invigorates me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So and plus his what do you call it? Operatic, his vocal range and style. A lot of these groups, like their lead singers, had like a certain quality, a certain vocal range that some of them were kind of the same, but to me, that's what made them stand out. They, wah, you
Right.
know, and
Right.
so
But
anyway,
yeah, you bring up a good point. Dio was a very positive. If you look through his lyrics, they were all about self-actualization and you know pursuing your dreams
yep,
and you know going through tough things and then something good happens. I
yep,
would consider him to be very positive, but it's
yes,
sort of couched in these terms of scary supernatural scenarios.
right,
And I think that that's how he blended in with these other satanic metal cats,
sure,
when the reality is he wasn't really like that. He was more sort of mystical, you know.
yep, yep,
Dragons and rings, man, dragons and rings.
heck yeah,
That was his thing. So,
yep,
and the thing that, and first of all, God rest his soul. Unfortunately, Mr. Dio's no longer with us. But I mean, his legacy lives on, and the material I think is as strong today as it was then.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Of course, that's
yep,
one man's
heck yeah,
opinion. That's one man's opinion. So, as we are starting to veer closer into some of the more modern material, This one was the quintessential album by these guys, and they had many great ones and many that almost made this list. But the one that I chose was number 4, Metallica, Kill 'Em All. And that's from 1983. And as you can see on the screen there, this is sort of like a stylized hand reaching for a bloody hammer. And of course, same thing. The first time I saw this one, I was like, what? It's like just so much suggested violence in that image. And the music was so raw and so aggressive. And speaking honestly, I loved metal, but I didn't really like Metallica that much on the first pass. I had to sort of grow into it. It's even a little bit punky, if you know what I mean.
Right. Now that's one I didn't listen to recently. Does that have For Whom the Bell Tolls on it, or is
I
that
think
a
that's
different?
on the second album. This one has
Okay.
The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Seek and Destroy is on this one.
Okay. I have
And
to
so
listen to that.
it's some of their earlier material, and it's really kind of raw, and I didn't at the time, I didn't really appreciate the musicianship on it. Like I had to
Sure. Yep.
sort of grow into it, and
Yep.
I think I've mentioned before, I was never a punk fan and probably not ever gonna be.
Right.
And the reason why is not because I wasn't a fan of all kinds of music, but have you noticed there's kind of a groundswell lately that people are sort of promoting punk music again and punk books and things like this.
Yep.
And they've sort of forgotten that there was a
Goth.
reason.
They call it,
Well,
Tim, they call it emo now.
yeah,
It's
I'm not so
emo.
sure that's the case, but
I
let's
still
play
don't
along and say it is.
understand. I hear emo and I think Elmo. So I don't,
Well, to me, when I think punk, of course, I was alive during the first punk revolution, the
yep.
Sex Pistols and
Yep.
the Dead Kennedys and the DRI, and we've forgotten that there was a reason why punk died, and that's because the songs weren't any good.
Right.
And I look forward to viewers correcting me down in the comments. Feel free to correct me, man. That's why there's chocolate and vanilla, right? That's one man's opinion. Your mileage may vary, but I'd if you made a list of the top 20 punk songs, you might have one or two that I might even be able to sit through. And by the way, it's not me being insulting on someone. I was a musician at the time, and you remember punk musicians wore it as a badge of honor that they could not play their instruments. And for example, like remember, it was considered uncool to tune up before you went on stage. Like what?
Wow. Right.
Yeah, and that was just anathema to me. So I've never followed it, and it's one of the reasons why today, when people say things like, "Yeah, I got this punk band" or "I got this punk book," I'm always like, "Oh yeah, great,"
Yep.
But of course, I support anybody, no matter what they're doing. I'm sure there's plenty of people that say that about what I'm making. So
here, have this Iron Maiden album.
Well, yeah, and the thing about just to touch on Iron Maiden again, because they're coming up here in a second. The thing about metal bands, and I think most people would agree here, they were sort of known for being technical virtuosos. And what I mean by that is that every metal band had what you would call a guitar hero. That's not really a thing anymore, but it was considered cool to be the best guitar player on the planet. Whereas remember, for punk, it was kind of cool to be the worst one.
Right.
So it just never clicked with me. So not planning on going back to it anytime soon. But speaking of the best guitar players, I'd be doing all of us a disservice if I did not mention the musical stylings of Judas Priest, our number 3, Screaming for Vengeance.
Hell yes.
That is the dual axe attack of KK Downing and Glenn Tipton, and who is recently going through some health challenges, and we certainly wish him the best. But they were among the first. There were several at this time, but they were among the first to do the dual guitar harmonies, which sort of became their trademark. Iron Maiden didn't too. Before you guys jack me up down in the comments, I get it that Iron Maiden did that too, but they were roughly in the same timeline. So I can remember the first time when I heard this Priest album, I was like, what? It blew me away. It was so tight. And the singing of Rob Halford, he just,
oh my God. Yes.
It was you that used the word operatic, and that was him all day long. Are you a Priest fan at all?
On those early ones, yes. Yeah. In fact, my oldest boy, who's 22, also is he knows you got another thing coming
Oh yeah.
very well, because
Yeah.
I used to play that song. It's such a that's another one where it just like fills you with energy. And
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
It's great to get pumped up, right?
it's got some awesome lines in it.
Yeah.
So especially when you've had a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
I'm a
is where
huge
the talking ends.
I'm a huge Priest fan, and I will remain that way probably till I die. It's just etched into me
Mm-hmm.
to the level where I could probably recite most of the lyrics, and I mean I can play most of those songs.
Nice.
Hey, do you know "Breaking the Law"? Do you know that one?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's a
Breaking
great
the
one too.
law. Breaking the law.
That's a great one
You
too.
don't know what it's like.
You know it, man. You know it.
Yep.
So you see, there's something that's intrinsically fun about heavy metal, and Pete, I want to ask you a question because you're a creator, much like myself. And I've mentioned before, I'm always inspired by music. That's kind of one of my things. Yeah. You were the best, brother. But do you ever find scenarios where music inspires your writing?
Yes. Um, like I said, Rainbow Rising.
Hmm.
That that has inspired more of my writing than probably any other album. There's so many visuals in all those songs, and I like listening to that. Sometimes I don't listen to music because then it seems like it garbles my thought process. But
People, I've heard that before, and that's why I ask people say, "Oh, I can't listen to music while I'm writing because
right,
But I don't have that problem, so maybe it's me that's weird."
I think just different strokes for different folks. I don't know, but yeah, that Rainbow Rising. Um, the There's some Blue Oyster Cult
Oh
too.
man,
That Blue Oyster Cult was another one of my favorite bands that I think I discovered after I had collected every AC/DC album record that they ever made, and then I started yeah, well, all the mainstream ones like AC/DC and Van Halen and all that stuff, Aerosmith. But then I listened to some Blue Oyster Cult. That again, at first you stayed away from that because Blue Oyster Cult, and they've got that symbol
yeah.
and whatever. But then you start listening to the songs, like, man, these things are fun, and they're, to me, they're like one of those sci-fi rock bands, like Dio and Rainbow with their sorcery and uh like Lady of the Lake almost type stuff.
Sure, sure.
So, but
Yeah,
anyway,
I'm a huge Blue Oyster Cult fan, and do you mind if I ask you what's your favorite Blue Oyster Cult song?
uh, does there have to be only one? Um, I'd say Black Blade,
Oh wow, okay.
and because it was a weird thing that I was reading um, the Elric books by Michael Moorcock,
Warcock, yeah.
and then um, I heard the Blue Oyster Cult song Black Blade. I'm going, what the hell? This this like relates to what I'm, and then I found out that yeah, that's what it was all about. The Black Blade song. It was a nod. Well, I think those guys, Blue Oyster Cult, had anyway some affiliation with Moorcock. So
Yeah, yeah. And
anyway,
they were very literate too. And I'm
yep.
kind of surprised that you said that one. Almost everybody says
Oh,
Godzilla
fears.
right there.
Oh, well, that would be maybe my second. I love all their stuff. Shooting Shark.
I was gonna say that's on my list. And
I love the bass line. Bow, 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 bow.
yeah, yeah. And my two favorites are Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll,
Mm-hmm.
and I gotta mention Burning for You.
Right. On the Cultosaurus Erectus album that has the Black Blade song on it, the song that comes after that is the called the Golden Age of Leather.
Oh yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
if that doesn't inspire you to write some sort of
Yeah.
frickin' crazy apocalyptic whatever. Anyway, that's I think Godzilla was the first one I really liked, but then I started listening to some of their other albums, and that frickin' Black Blade, and then the um, Golden Age of Leather
Oh yeah. Good
was
stuff,
just
man.
like,
Good stuff.
yes. Anyway, but I digress.
No,
Let's
no,
get
it's
we
good
can
stuff, man. And
yeah.
believe me, I love talking about metal, and that's really what I'm encouraging because like we've mentioned, our channel and our conversations are really designed to stimulate conversations rather
Yep.
than to eliminate alternatives. And that's
Right.
why I love when viewers chime in and say what they think. So, viewers, if you want to disagree with Peter, here's your chance, man. Leave a comment at the bottom. Now, I mentioned this band earlier, and I
You'll have
saved.
another thing coming.
I mentioned this band earlier, and I sort of saved the comments because I figured there's more to talk about on this one. And this is our number 2. It is Iron Maiden. That's Number of the Beast from 1982. And I'll slap it up there on the screen for you, for those of you that have forgotten. It is sort of a stylized image of the Iron Maiden mascot, Eddie, and he's controlling Satan, is what he's doing, as if he was a puppet. And, if you remember, this was super controversial at the time. People were getting together, they were burning the album. There were Christian groups that were what they were doing is they were buying these things by the truckload and taking them and throwing them onto bonfires. Do you remember this? Because it was
I
considered.
don't. Yeah, I don't remember that particular news item, but anyway.
Yeah, it was real controversial because there's Satan right on the cover of the album, 666, right? But the truth is, if you listen to the words, like all Iron Maiden songs, that the group is quite literate, right? Like you have
Mm-hmm.
Flight of Icarus and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and they're very well versed and very well read
Yep.
lyricists.
Yep.
And in this case, it isn't saying, "Hey, join up with Satan and do evil." It's kind of just telling a story.
Right.
And I was just captivated by this album. And in those days, I sat right down with the album, side one, put the needle down, and sat down with my bass and tried to play the entire album. And it's something that has stuck with me to this day. I still love those songs, and I still play them. And there was a couple of good ones on this album. This is also the one that has the Trooper on it, I'm pretty sure. But like I said, I'm a huge Maiden fan, and they're still around. They're still touring today,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of kills me, because if you would have said back in '82, these guys are going to be touring 40 years later with this.
Right.
I
Right.
would have told you, no, they're not, man. You're out of your
Yep.
mind. But
Right.
it's one of those things that American culture is a strange animal. You never quite know what's going to click.
Mm-hmm.
But, I tried to get tickets to go see them up here, and I guess it was Philly, and it was something like $400 a ticket.
Right.
Just to see Maiden.
Like I always wanted to see the Eagles, but I can't afford them.
Well, and that's something, maybe that's a topic for a different show, but,
Right.
I'm not pleased with the fact that concert going is now the pretty much the province of the wealthy. When you
Right.
talk about, anything over $300 or $400 for a single ticket, you've got to, it'll change your lifestyle. Like
Yep.
to take my
Yep.
family to see Iron Maiden, which I was really tried hard to do. I mean, it was well over $1,000. And the reason why I paused, I mean, as I said, I love Maiden. Why wouldn't it be worth it? Well, I saw them probably 4 or 5 times, but I saw them when they were on top of the world.
Right.
They were the #1 album. They were well known. They were at the top of their game, and I think I paid $11 for that ticket.
Right.
So to see them all these years later for what is essentially a nostalgia show, and
Right.
let's be honest, it's 40 times more.
Mm-hmm.
I had to do a hard pass.
Did they have the giant Eddie thing on the stage?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. They've always been at the forefront of these big stage effects, and they do the lasers and the giant eddies and the giant head and the.
I have to slide in here with on that thought and tell you viewers that if you have not gone to a Alice Cooper concert, you and I think his shows are still affordable, and he does such a great stage
Great
show,
show. Yep.
along with all the songs that you know.
Yeah.
And no, I am not being paid to promote Alice Cooper, but I've always liked his music,
Yeah.
and I got the opportunity to see him in, I think, 2014, outside a outdoor venue, and I think we were just like 2 rows back, and it was just the funnest show. And had all his props out there, and he was playing up to his Alice Cooper persona,
Right.
and kind of cynical and little evil and nasty. And at the end of the show, he came back out on stage just for a peep and said, "You're worthy." And everyone just went,
Yeah.
it was, anyway, but it's an amazing show. I know he's still out touring, and
Yeah. I
and
saw
plus,
him. Well, it was 2 years ago. I saw him.
yeah, and plus he's a really good guy,
Yeah.
from what I've
And
heard. So
you made a good point too, which his songs are really good.
yeah, yep,
I mean, they've stood the test of time. That's
yep,
something where, look, no offense, I love metal, but there's many of these songs didn't date very well.
right,
You
yep,
know what I mean?
yep,
The paint wears off. I mean, it's kind of like early when I was saying about the punk songs. When it came out and they were so edgy and sort of grinding, it was kind of cool to hear it that first
right,
time, but it certainly isn't something you would ever put on again. And, you talk about Alice Cooper, here it is 40, 50 years later, and he's probably as
he's
relevant as ever.
yes, for sure.
Yeah, I
Yep.
would agree with that.
God bless him.
Yeah, I'm an Alice fan.
Yes,
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
that's right.
That's a great jam. Now I saved an interesting one for number one, and we're going to go back some years here, Peter. Like I said,
Okay.
the purpose of our list here tonight is we're focusing on the classic metal album covers. And it's been disputed a number of times who the progenitor of heavy metal is in this era. And for me, it was always very easy. There's other contenders for this crown, but none of them deserve to wear the crown. And I'd be glad to go over that. But first, let's zero in on our number one. It's Black Sabbath with their eponymous debut from 1969, Black Sabbath. When I first saw this album, Pete, I was like, what is this?
That creep you out?
Yeah, it's creepy. And I can remember I had an older stepbrother. His name's Chris. And I love him a lot, although we're a little bit estranged these days. And he used to have sort of an attic room above my brother and I. And I used to sneak up into his room when he was not there. And I would flip through his record collection. And, he had all the usual stuff. Doobie Brothers, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd was in there.
Nice.
But then I
Yep.
flipped up to this one and I was like, what? And here it is, this woman looking super creepy, like a witch woman. And she's sort of
Right.
in this ancient setting with this old mill house behind her. And it's really difficult to describe why it is so creepy.
Well, she's in a particular color hue versus the rest of the picture, the illustration behind
Right.
her. So she kind of like sticks out. So it's the first thing that you kind of your eyes kind of focus on, and it's like, oh, this is
Well, and it's sometimes kind of difficult to create something like that. Like I read an interview with years later with the guys, and it was one of those things. They were just out taking photographs of the setting and the girl,
Yep.
trying to look for something that would be kind of looking like a scary movie.
Sure.
But sometimes, man, lightning strikes. And I tell you, it struck on this one because that image is so iconic. And I tell you, so I discovered this album. I ripped it right out of its sleeve and put it on the turntable. And of course, it starts out with the thunder and lightning and these very ominous, dissonant chords, right? And, then of course, Ozzy comes in. What is this that stands before me? And it's like, oh my God, what is this? And then, you listen through the whole album. And what I particularly liked, remember, I'm in the beginning years of learning how to play bass guitar. And I got to give a shout out here to one of the guys that I believe is one of the forefront of bass players of the metal age, Geezer Butler.
Yep.
And he was the guy who I always emulated up until I discovered Steve Harris. But
Right.
his bass playing on the Black Sabbath album made me sit up and take notice, because it was the first time that I really realized that a bass player could really jam and
Right.
really add something to the structure of a song. And he's also one of those guys that he does not mimic what the guitar player is doing.
Right.
So it was the first time that I, as a musician, was exposed to what they would call complementary lines. Like if the keys match up, you don't have to play the same thing that the guitar player is doing. And
Right.
it sounds even better that way if they're a little bit different. And a good example of that is on one of the tracks of that album, which is called Fairies Wear Boots. And it was one of the first times that I heard, wow, the bass player's not doing at all what the guitar player's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they complement each other. So it was a little bit of an educational experiment for me. But you know, after that day, I bought every album that Black Sabbath put out.
Yes, I was looking for my favorite.
Oh, Paranoid.
That is my favorite. Like early. That's the one. I mean, I probably had when I first started getting into vinyl way back in the day. Um, I think I had like an Aerosmith album, Van Halen, and probably Ted Nugent, Cat Scratch Fever, or Free
Yeah,
for All.
sure.
Um, and Black Sabbath, I think was, I mean, they probably were part of that initial group of albums that I started out with, and that just I love that album.
That's a great album too. And I think a lot of people would say that's their favorite. It's got War Pigs on there,
Yeah,
Paranoid. Uh,
generals gathered in their masses.
and you could probably say that that was kind of the breakout album for Sabbath. That's where they first started to get
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah,
So, but you know, I didn't choose it for album cover because what a weird cover, right? It's like a dude
yeah.
holding the fluorescent sword, and he's got
Right,
like
whatever hell
he's got
that's
a
all.
pink leotard on. And I read a interview with was it with Ozzy? I guess it was one of the members of Black Sabbath. I forget
Yeah,
which one. It doesn't matter for the story. But what he was saying was when we saw the album cover, we were like, what the heck's this got to do with our music? And you know,
right,
it's this guy hopping around in the forest with this pink leotard on, and he's got this toy sword, and it's just weird, you know. But you know, the 70s were a weird time, man.
right,
You could really put anything on the front of an album and people would buy it and dig it.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And I like to talk about this one because it's often the source of some controversy. What I mean by this is that some people would disagree that this is the first heavy metal album. And the reason why they disagree is they occasionally point to a band by the name of Blue Cheer. Are you familiar with
Okay.
Blue Cheer?
No.
That's, I think, 68, or it might have been 67. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but their song was Summertime Blues, and it was sort of like a heavy, distorted version with a really it was like a really driving,
Mm-hmm.
grinding, pseudo metalish version. So often people say, hey, well, actually, Blue Cheer was the first heavy metal album. And I'm quick to correct them that I don't think it qualifies. Can I tell you why?
Why?
Because heavy metal over the years has come to always include certain elements in the genre, and most of
Okay.
them are not present in the Blue Cheer album. Blue Cheer is not the first heavy metal act. They are the last acid rock act.
Oh, yep.
So there's a difference between acid rock and heavy metal, and I'd like to go over it with you here. The first difference is that metal tends to focus on what I call dissonant chords. It isn't necessarily that the guitar is distorted, it's that they're playing chords that don't quite even go together, which Black Sabbath did that a lot, and they
Right.
used it to great effect. The second thing is heavy metal tends to emphasize supernatural or occult elements.
Yep.
I'm not saying that it has to, but it tends to. And usually, if something has all those things, it's probably heavy metal. Blue Cheer doesn't have that, it's just distorted guitar. So that's one of those things I would say they do not qualify as a heavy metal act.
I would agree with you after that
Yeah.
information.
And especially when you break it down by its categories, you
But
look through all
it sounds like something I want to look up though and listen to, because
yeah.
I know that's a
There ain't no cue for the summertime blues.
yeah, yep.
It's like that.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and they played like a hard version of it. You could even say
Right.
it's a metal version, but you couldn't say that they were a heavy metal act,
Right.
you know? So, and that's how I drew the line there.
Yeah. No,
So,
that makes sense.
you know, that's our list. And that got us to 11. And viewers, I'd like to ask for your feedback here. If you disagree with any of our choices, please let us know in the comments. And if you'd like to add your own, man, we'd love to hear what you have to say. And in my case, I just want to make a quick comment. Pete, you know, I'm a comics writer. And
What?
one thing I've noticed over the years, for some reason, and I don't know why this is, but the world of heavy metal and the world of comics are linked.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know why that is, but it comes up all the time, much in the same way that comics and tattoos are always linked.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the music, from a music standpoint, and you might be going there, but is the energy and the imagination that the music invokes, at least for me.
Yeah.
So, but
Like I say, I don't know why it is, but most times when you talk to somebody that's a comics writer or illustrator,
mm-hmm.
a lot of heavy metal fans in there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, like I say, I'm not sure why that is, but it definitely applies to me. Applies very strongly to me.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
So what? Air supply doesn't hold water for you?
You know, I'm not here to rip on air supply.
To make you envision, you know, apocalyptic carnage and mayhem.
Not typically.
No? Okay.
And like I say, I am a fan of you know, classical music, pop music. You know, I'd like a couple of the punk songs, and I'm a fan of really all kinds of music. But my go-to, man, I'm a metalhead, and it's every time I try to refer back to it, I'm like, well, I guess I was always that way. And you know, here it is 2023, and I'm still that way, maybe a little bit more than ever. You know, the boy and I just got back from seeing Sabaton, which is one of my favorite new acts. And
nice.
Yeah, I'd like to take him now to see concerts that, you know, hopefully to install a little bit of love of music in him.
Yep.
And I have a genuine concern about, I've talked about this many times. You notice there's really no modern albums that we chose here very much. And there are a couple of good ones, but I felt that was more of a topic for another list, because modern music has changed so much since these seminal and influential albums that I was almost doing a disservice. It doesn't really, like, say, for example, I'm a huge Ghost fan.
Right.
But it almost seems weird to include them on the same list with Number of the Beast, right? So maybe we'll do a part 2, which is the top 11 modern metal.
There you go. Yep.
And also, not for nothing, but they don't really have album covers anymore. You know, what you get, I guess, is you can look at the art thumbnail while you stream it or whatever, and it's just not the same.
Right.
Not the same feeling.
True. Yep.
But man, there was no feeling like in those days. Man, you'd buy that album, peel the plastic off, and you'd take it out and read the liner notes and all the stuff, and you could read the back cover and see who everybody was and who the writers were. And I just loved albums, and I'm still that way now.
Yeah. My middle boy, who's 19, now he didn't buy any rock albums, but he bought some Juice World, and anyway, some people that I haven't really listened to, and but he bought the vinyl. He thought that I still had my stereo system, you know, around. He goes, "Hey Dad, can you like break out your," I'm like, "Oh dude," and he's like, "What do I do with these now?" And I said, "Keep them."
Yeah.
Vinyl
It's a collectible
is
now.
Yeah, it's, to me, vinyl, I don't care who the artist is, it's cool stuff.
It is, man. It is. And we bought one album when we were at this concert. They had a, what it is, it's a Sabaton album that was signed by the members.
Nice.
And I was like, whoa, you got to get this. And it was like, I want to say it was like $60 or something.
Sure.
It wasn't, I didn't find that to be prohibitive, you know?
Right.
So that was, man, what an experience seeing that show. And, you know, there is no thrill like seeing live music, in my opinion. That's something where, you know, that moment when you're all pressed up against the stage and it gets real quiet for a second and the lights go down, you're like, oh, this is it. This is when they're coming out. I mean, it's, you know, it's so exciting. So exciting.
Yep. Heck yeah.
So in closing, I want to say, Pete, man, it's such a pleasure to see you. And thanks so much for joining us on another Top 11. I wanted to congratulate you on the success of your recent Kickstarter campaign,
Oh, thank you.
Silver and Steam. Can you tell us a little bit about where we can find them?
So Silver and Steam, we just wrapped up a Kickstarter, um, mainly because I haven't won Powerball yet, so I still have to go through crowdfunding.
I do it too, brother. I do it
Yeah,
too.
yep. So, and I thank all the backers and all the people that supported this. So Silver and Steam just wrapped up a Kickstarter campaign, fully funded. Thank you very much, everybody. The book should be available beginning of February. It was like completely done at the time we did the Kickstarter, which was great. I mean, the other creative, the rest of the creative team, the illustrators just did a beautiful job through
Yeah,
and
it
through.
looks great. Pete,
Yeah,
I've seen
it's
it on the social media, and I have to say again, I'm proud to say it in front of the viewers. I'm a fan of your work, and I was, as you know, I'm a follower of the Big Jack trilogy by
mhm,
Peter Welmerink, and I felt it was one of the best books of the last couple of years. And
yeah,
it's always just a pleasure to have you on. I support you 100%. And, as I've said before, I think our destinies are linked a little bit.
yes,
Eventually we're going to, for those that don't know, we've talked a couple of times about linking up as co-publishers, and there's going to be something in the future. And that's, as Earth Dog Studios goes through a couple of changes this year, you're going to be hearing more about this. And
yep,
I just want you to know, I say that with all sincerity. I think your work's terrific.
yeah. Well, and the same with you, with all the, like we were talking the other day about the Hunchback. That's my favorite. Um, and the Water Wars 2233. I didn't screw that up, did I?
You did.
Oh fuck.
That's
What
okay.
a,
You can see it behind us here. It's Water Wars 2288.
hey,
I know you're kidding around. So
yes.
that's
Anyway,
something I guess I
but
should mention too, while we're doing a quick promo. I have volume 4 is coming out here. Well, heck, I guess I'll have the files tomorrow. And
yep,
it had a digital release on Christmas Eve. So technically that's a 2022 release, since some people have that already. But the
yep,
print release will be, it'd probably be the third week of January, something like that.
yep. And those are great stories. And I know people sometimes diss on us people that like these post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic tales. But I don't. I think the thing that makes our work stand out is that it's not doom and gloom, even though the background is kind of gloomy, but the stories are of strong characters who are moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that's, I think maybe that's also why I like your work, because it the behind the scene matter, where the characters are moving forward. That's what I like. I want to, yes, sometimes you stumble and fall, and that's perfectly okay in real life and in a story or a comic. You don't always win, but the important thing is that you get back on your feet. And I think that's what I see in your stories. That's what I try to imbue in my stories, no matter what they are. Big Jack or Silver and Steam is kind of a sci-fi piece, but again, there's a threat in the Silver and Steam, this first issue, that could end one of the main characters, and she doesn't even know really what she did.
Mm.
And so anyway, but it and also I kind of turned the antagonist by the end of the story on its head. So you kind of realize that, well, maybe this antagonist, just had a reason for doing what he did. And, so I won't say much more. I'll ruin it.
I've got to check that out. Viewers, that is Silver and Steam by Peter Welmerink. It looks terrific. I was up in New York, so I missed the end of the Kickstarter. But I'll get with you after the show, and I got
Oh
to
yeah.
make sure I get my copies, man, because I'm a
Oh,
fan
you will.
already. Yeah,
I've already got copies set aside for you.
And I've got, since we're promoting our stuff, if you'd like to keep your eyes on Kickstarter, I'll have some links here in the comments. I've got my newest project coming out. That's with Mr. Erwin Arosa, and it is a young adult sci-fi adventure called Call of the Cryptid. So if you're a fan of the X-Files and UFO stories and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, don't miss Call of the Cryptid. It's going to be the book of the year for 2023.
And also with the art by Erwin Arosa, the guy should be doing work for.
He's amazing.
For bigger dogs than
me and
us
you.
dogs.
Yeah. I will tell you, and by the way, I think you and I are the same. We're both fortunate enough to have become friends with him. Like he and I talk every day, even if we're not making books, and he's just a heck of a good guy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm lucky to be affiliated with these talented people. You know, it's kind of happened accidentally. As I told you before, I'm really, you know, I mentioned before, I really am a writer. All this publishing kind of happened accidentally to me. I didn't know that's what was going to happen, but yeah, I'm a publisher now, so may as well run with it, see what happens. But yeah, so we both have a couple of new books coming out this year. I'd like to thank Peter Welmerink for coming on the show tonight. It's a pleasure, as always, man. One of my favorite people. And also thanks to our viewers for tuning in. If you'd like to like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. Just hit that button at the bottom, and look forward to seeing you again on our next Top 11 list. Good night, everybody.
Good night.